Welcome to the City of Marion's Refugee Week event. Tonight we've got people from refugee background, a film about sports and football, and a theme about local country Australian towns. So this is going to be a good night.
I just want to recognise that we're on the traditional lands of the Kaurna people. We still respect their elders past and present at Marion Council. It's Refugee Week, so it's a great thing in Australia that we acknowledge that there are so many tens of millions of people around the world who have had to flee their own country because of war, because of persecution, or because of natural disasters, any of these reasons. And Australia, of course, does have a refugee intake, and we have refugees living in Marion very happily and successfully. But Council is also very conscious of the struggles of settling in, and so we do our best to engage with people from different cultures, and particularly through our neighbourhood centres. If you have not visited one of our neighbourhood centres, there's one at Glandore, one at Mitchell Park, one at Trott Park, and one just behind the council chambers called Cooinda, then I hope you will just visit at least to find out what goes on there, because there are a lot of community activities that are very helpful. And Refugee Week is particularly important to myself. I was, because I'm a lawyer, apart from being mayor, and from the year 2002 onwards for several years, I was involved in representing many, something over 100 refugees who were detained at Woomera and later at the Baxter camp outside of Port Augusta. I still feel quite distressed thinking about it, because they were very difficult times for those people, and getting to know people who have been through such ordeals can be distressing in itself, and that is what compels us to all have compassion for those who are new to Australia. Well, that's enough of an introduction, and I want to now introduce particularly our two special guests. Alepati Carline he was born in Fiji, came to Australia aged 1, so I'm going to ask you about how much you remember about Fiji. Went on to play for Port Adelaide Football Club for 11 years. I knew that, yeah, I'm sure some of you are Secret Crows supporters. And Alepate is Multicultural Programs Manager as part of Power Community Limited, and I'll ask him to explain what that organisation is in a moment. Emmanuel Ira, his parents came out from Uganda in 2005. He was the first Ugandan to play South Australian National Football League with South Adelaide, where he currently plays. And you're going to hear about him soon as an AFL player as well, I reckon. So I just want to ask these gentlemen a few questions about their experiences, and I hope that you'll find that interesting. Alepata, first of all, tell us about your parents' decision to come to Australia from Fiji.
I was born in Fiji, in Lautoka, which is at the north of the main island. Mum's Fijian and Dad's Australian. They'd been together for about 5 or 6 years prior to me being born. My older brother was born in Fiji as well, and this was in 1987. And for those of you in the room probably wouldn't understand, but there was a military coup where the military overthrew the government, and there was a recommendation from the Australian government for all Australians to get out. So Mum and Dad had to pack up pretty abruptly and leave the country. I only found this out probably a decade ago, and I've only just really started to understand the impact that it probably had on my small family, but in particular my mother. And it's something that I'm really proud that she did, because the 5 of us now are really well set up in Australia, and we still have a strong connection with Fiji and going back all the time, but there's some cultural stuff that we're still trying to catch up on, having been born, having grown up in country Victoria, in a small town called Wangaratta, where we were pretty much the only family of colour within the town for the best part of 16 years that I grew up there. So yeah, that's a little bit about the journey.
Well, just on that topic of growing up, Did you experience racism as you were growing up?
Looking back on it now, I definitely experienced some shades of racism, but I didn't really see it as racism back then. I just thought I was getting bullied for being overweight and a bit different to everyone else. And I just took it as they were just jealous of my tan. So it was a little bit different to what I view as racism now. And racism really is up to the individual, is how they feel being called those names, or however sort of racism sort of pops its head up. So as a young Fijian growing up in country Victoria, I'd say I was racially vilified on numerous occasions, but I didn't really view it that way at that stage.
And you work in the area of multiculturalism now. Can you tell us how you came to be conscious of the different cultures of Australia, the need for multiculturalism? What was your education process in that field?
Getting drafted to AFL, you go through certain education programs around gambling, around mental health, and one of them is racial discrimination, and that sort of opened my eyes, being an 18-year-old straight into the AFL, and understanding of the history behind the racism in the AFL is pretty important. Dating back to supporting the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander players within the game itself, and still to this day, education's needed to keep improving how we react, how we educate the people that are actually racially vilifying people, but how that, the important part for the role that we're playing at the moment is how that filters down to the lower grades, because we understand that that's a serious challenge in those grades of welcoming these new sort of communities into Australia and making sure that they enjoy the game of AFL as what it is, as the number one sport in Australia.
I'll come back to you, Alipate, about your current work, but I want to ask Emmanuel, what about your parents' decision to come to Australia? How did all of that come about?
Yeah, so my parents decided to come out to Australia just for the quality of life. So Uganda was great. I mean, I was a young kid there, just doing what normal kids do, but it was really difficult to get the basic needs to have a good quality of life. So my mom and dad decided Australia was the destination, purely because my dad's sister had been living in Australia, and she had been suggesting to push my dad to bring out the 4 boys that my dad had, and also the 2 girls. So it was a big family, and for him it was an easy decision, because a lot of things happen when you're sort of struggling. Sickness might happen, and if the immediate help is not there, it's very hard to survive. And to come out here and start sort of trying to strive for a better life was a great decision that I thoroughly thank my parents for each day.
And as I asked Alipate, what was it like growing up? I think you came out when you were about 11, so did you experience racism as a teenager?
Yeah, like Alipate said, I think I definitely did, because when I first started going to school, I was the first coloured person for about 2 or 3 years within, I'm sure you know the school called Sacred Heart Middle School. So that was where I started, and I was, I think I got embraced by a lot of the kids, but also there's just the odd 1 or 2 or 3 kids who don't really understand, just being kids at the time, I guess.
And you became very successful with your football. Did that help you settle into Australia?
Yeah, I think that's definitely why the reason I started playing, because I felt like I could have something to talk about on a Monday. So instead of coming in, what do you do on the weekend, you know? Well, so Fridays, my friends would pick me up, stay at the house, play up all night, get up, play footy on Saturday morning. And that's what we did for a good probably 5-6 years before going to the middle school.
I was going to say, so life hasn't changed since then, huh?
No.
No, I know you have
Just
to be
a little
really
bit.
disciplined, actually, don't you, to succeed? You're playing for South Adelaide now?
Yeah, so actually the way I got to South Adelaide, we used to live on Dover Gardens. So that was our first actual house when we first came to Australia. It was Hope Street. I don't know if any of you guys are familiar with that. So we lived there for about 5 years, and then my parents just came here, put their head down, and bought a house up in Noarlunga, and at that time, that's where the South Adelaide zone is. So I just went out to training having no idea what South Adelaide is about or anything, and then they were very welcoming at the time, so I just loved it ever since, and that's why I'm still at that club.
And you mentioned to me before we started tonight that you'd actually gone back a little while ago to visit the village in Uganda where you grew up. And what was that experience like, going back after all this time in Australia?
Yeah, I think it really changed my life, to be honest, because I really went and seen my own family, like I said earlier, just struggling for the basic needs like medicine, food. You know, it's not a luxury to say so. You know, people eat or drink when they need. It's not like, oh, I'm just gonna drive to the service station and or supermarket. So that opened my eyes to say, hey, look where you're at and look at the opportunities that are in front of you. Regardless of what you decide to do, you can't compare to what your family is going through. So that's always a good reminder for myself to always give it my best shot in whatever I'm trying to do with my life, because they're living to survive. Here I'm living to really do whatever, go to school, go to work, anything I want to do with my life, the opportunity is here for me to do it. So that's the way I think about it.
And Emmanuel, you're in a really good position to be able to assess some of the differences in the culture between an African village and the life there and life in the city of Adelaide. What are some of the differences that you would describe?
Yeah, obviously the city itself, there's a lot of vibrancy in the Western world, whereas in Uganda, for example, some places they've never even seen electricity. So that's really what I'm talking about. And for me to go back and sleep on the ground with just clothes or whatever was eye-opening, and then to come out here to drive your own car like some of my family. When I went back and we'll be sitting down and discussing some things and they'll see a plane go, they're like, wow, how did people even come up to think of such kind of thing? So as basic as how they think and how we think here, it's a completely different world.
And what about family life, the culture of family, social life? It might seem obvious, but what are the differences?
Yeah, I think the difference is everyone's one community. So, for example, in this council, Marion here, everyone would know everybody. I'm saying family, generations, from down to the T. What your kids do, how many kids you have, what school they go to. So it's sort of a whole community responsibility to make sure that all the kids grow up and actually become good members of the community. And that's their number one focus there, because everybody needs each other at some stage. And I think sometimes we sort of misunderstand that in the Western world, where it's a very individual lifestyle and very isolated. But I feel somewhere in between there and here would be a perfect combination, because here it's all great, you have all these amazing opportunities, but you don't even know 5 doors down the road, So who are you really enjoying life with? That's some of the things that I've picked up.
For sure. And well said. And if I could go back to Alipate, you came out when you were very young. So what sort of a connection do you feel to Fijian culture today?
Yeah, so after I got drafted, I went back every year. Went back a few times prior to that, but with mum and dad and the family. But every year after I got drafted, I went back until the kids come along. So yeah, it was always, I'd go back for a week during off season and barely train or anything, but it was just it was more just to get back and reconnect with the family. And like E-Man said earlier, like going back, and it's pretty humbling knowing that your family, how they're living over there and stuff. And I'd go back and I'd sleep on the floor with like cousins and stuff, and there'd probably be 2 or 3 families within the house that are sort of floating around, and that's like a real community feel where they help everyone else's kids and stuff grow up within the village and stuff. And yeah, it's just always a it's a great time to go home, or whenever you go home, to make sure that you're checking in with the family and checking in with the cousins and stuff, and watching them grow up. And that's probably one of the good things about social media these days. You can just check up on them on there. But obviously, I'd love to get back a bit more.
Yeah, fair enough. And tell us a bit more about this organisation that you work for, and how does it relate to the Port Adelaide Football Club as such?
Yeah, so Power Community Limited was founded in 2008, and it's the non-for-profit arm of the football club. And we go out to primary schools all the way through to high schools, and after that and deliver messages of making good choices, healthy eating, healthy lifestyles, and cultural awareness, and different pieces depending on what the community says is the challenge that they're facing. So we've got some really strong programs within the Indigenous space at the moment. And I was talking earlier about it's been running for 12 years now, the Aboriginal Power Cup, which was today and yesterday. We had over 410 students of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander background come to Adelaide and experience Adelaide, and from all parts of the state. And yeah, they've got their SACE credits that they've completed throughout the semester, which is another bonus that links everything to education, which is we know is really important in helping that close the gap.
And your organisation promotes traineeships as well?
Yeah, we do. We've got a really important program at the moment, which is the Powerful Futures program, which helps Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students, but also multicultural students, and any student that goes through any of our programs become a part of an alumni, where we support them to gain either employment or extra tertiary education through helping them with CVs, putting them through mock interviews, introducing them to potential employees and stuff like that. So it's a really important program, and one that's starting to really grow each year. We've got a full-time staff member that's dedicated to that now, which is really important. And I think he's placed 60 people in the past year, 60 young people to either extra tertiary or employment opportunities. So it's really important.
Yeah, that's impressive. I might just mention there too, little ad for Marion Council, because we have now embraced 3 traineeships every year that we'll take on. One for a person with disabilities, one for a person of Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander background, and one for a person of culturally or linguistically diverse background, often non-English speaking background, but not necessarily. So we're trying to do our own little bit there. Do you feel, Alipati, that things have changed in the multicultural sort of understanding in the time that you've been involved?
Yeah, definitely. The football club's really embraced the multicultural people and of South Australia, especially with the program that I'm managing at the moment. And we deal with both male and female students, with introducing them to AFL so they can undergo cultural awareness training. All the educational stuff that I deliver is linked back to Aboriginal culture and history, to make sure that they understand that the history of Australia with the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, who a lot of the students that I deal with, they really connect really heavily with some of the stuff that's happened in Aboriginal history. And one of the assessments, which I think is probably the best assessment that we've created, is for them to link it back to their own family's history with getting to Australia, and some of the challenges in that either their parents or their grandparents have faced when they've not only landed here, but actually the journey across. So it creates that level of communication between the parents and the student about opening up communication about some of the challenges that they faced, which for me, it only happened probably 5 or 6 years ago with my mum and dad. So that's one thing that I want the students going through the program to go through at a younger age, to start to have open and honest communication with their parents about some of the challenges they're facing with either their cultural identity, which everyone faces at some stage, or with feelings of trying to belong. And we believe that sport is an unbelievable space to break down those sort of barriers of feelings of belonging and creating a greater sense of community.
Something I've noticed talking to school principals in our area, and also to our own neighbourhood centre staff, as we try and get the message out to new arrival communities, that in many ways it's the children who teach the parents about some of the things that are going on in Australia or some of the benefits that are out there, because sometimes the people in a new community will maybe keep to themselves, but of course the children are going to school and they're learning opportunities, learning things about Australian culture. Can you relate to that from the young people that you've dealt with?
Yeah, especially kids these days are so inquisitive because these things in their hand called mobile phones, and so they've got information at the touch of their hand. They really want to understand the why about everything. So sport, I believe, creates that community feel where they feel that they belong outside of just their family, and they want to explore the world and everything like that, which I believe should be encouraged. And sport's a great way to sort of create those sort of pathways now for kids going forward, and it also helps them to have friends from different cultures and understand that how important empathy is, and understanding what the person next to you is going through, which sport is a great way to teach that. So, and be part of a team and understanding leadership and so many other different aspects of community that can be transferred into everyday life is really important that sport sort of teaches you, and something that I've learned through sport myself, and E-Man would probably attest to it himself as well, that that some of the barriers that we might have faced had we not been a part of sport, and in particular football, is really important that these kids are going through these experiences.
And Emmanuel, tell us about South Adelaide Football Club. What sort of programs do they have to make people feel welcome if they're from a different background or whatever?
Yeah, they're really also welcoming. So for me, I think the club, they're embracing different cultures purely because of the impact. I think myself and my brother Robert Ira, who has also played league football, but he's taken a bit of time off to get a few things right off the field. Just purely because there's a change, us coming into the club, and a few other young potential kids embracing that challenge of, hey, we understand, and I'm really honest and open about the challenges that I'm going through. So then it makes it easier for my football manager to deal with the next sort of young man coming in, and knowing that you can't treat everyone the same, because they might have different challenges at home or what's going on in their life. So I think the most important thing when you join a club, doesn't matter where you come from, as long as you're open and honest about things that are happening in your life, and they'll accommodate, and that's what they've been able to do.
And perhaps you could tell us a couple of stories or memories from that time when you first arrived at South Adelaide. How was it a change, or how did people respond?
Yeah, it was obviously daunting to go down there and sort of be the only coloured guy, not only at South Adelaide, but within the whole league. So that was a very sort of interesting experience, but I just loved football that much. I didn't really care too much about what anybody was thinking at the time, whether it was good or bad. I was just chasing the ball at the time. So for me, I haven't thought too much about that question, but it's just been a great journey for me. It's like I'm living in a dream. So I'm forever grateful. But the first memory was when Ron Fuller probably said, we're gonna give you your first league game, and that was in my wildest dreams. Never imagined myself chasing some funny football. Back then it was getting $200 to go and chase this ball and try and touch it as much as you can, and that was all you had to do. So
and you've had a few touches over the years.
Yeah, no, it was probably one of the best memories. And then we lost, but it was just great to get not only the team, but getting messages from Alapere at the time. He was playing for Port Adelaide, getting support from him, getting support from a few of the boys in Melbourne. So it was just fantastic, and that's what the game does. It sort of embraces everybody within the one culture.
So what do you think the other players have learnt from you?
Yeah, I think they've learned to be more accepting and more understanding and more like that fire, because I think people who come from a sort of a rougher road, to say the least, they have that fire in them, you know, and regardless if they're given that opportunity to really strive, they will achieve anything in their life. But it's understanding people and knowing what that fire is. Mine happened to be football. I was very lucky, easy. But some might be, you know, great educators. Some might be, I don't know, riding horses or whatever, you know.
And something Alipata referred to was what you can learn from sport, and from, especially from team sport, that actually is a lesson for life generally. Have you learned those sort of life lessons from playing footy?
One of them definitely resilience and staying true to the task, you know. A game goes for 120 minutes, I think. So
Seems like a long time, eh?
Yeah, a long time. When it's really hard, it gets hard out there. Everyone's tired, everyone's sweating, everyone's lethargic. So, and then I transfer that into my life. You know, you're working 7 days a week or whatever. At the end of the week, you're tired, you're doing this, but then you have to get up on Monday and go again. So it's sort of that, having that resilience and staying focused on your journey on life and in sports. Sort of the same correlation. So, and with a team, you know, you're working with your family, that's a team there. So when you come home, you're not just throwing yourself on the bed. You have your brothers there, you have to make sure you have to do things with them. So you have to play your team within your team, wherever that might be. Not just on the field, but off the field also.
Well, I know that because you're not in the AFL yet, you still have to have a daytime job during the week to make ends meet along with your football payments. So you have to be really resilient and focused. Everyone, could you give Emmanuel a round of applause? Because he's really made a great life as a successful Australian, which is a wonderful thing. Good on you, mate.
Thank you very much.
And Alipata, you're doing such wonderful work in multiculturalism with your organisation there through the Port Power Club assistance, and you're clearly learning a lot through the process as well. Can we give Alipata a big round of applause for the work he's doing and his own journey? Thank you.
Thanks, brother.
It was like really good. Excellent.
Oh, it made me feel really good.
Extremely good and positive.
Don't give up, something like that.
Whenever you unify people, you achieve great things.
Great that people can include people in society and be very community focused.
Overall, I think the message was clear. It was about people being people and helping each other out. Yeah.